I was playing white against a player who USCF rating is about 2050. So now I'm starting to play some stronger players, and I didn't do a ton of preparation, but I started with knight f3. He went d5. I thought it was a very interesting game, actually. I felt like it was pretty thematic for the opening. And then I went e3. E3 poison. Shout out to all the folks that enjoyed this one. Personally, I still feel like it's a very interesting way for white to play. But yeah, so c4, black went c6, so kind of playing like a Slav setup. I played knight c3, black played e6. And here, of course, white can go d4 at any moment to transpose, but I wanted to kind of try a different setup. So b3, black went bishop d6, went bishop b2, black castled, and I went queen c2. And so far, this is all normal for white, like all the pieces kind of belong here. And at some point, I have to decide whether I want to play d4, whether I want to play like some weird bishop d3, maybe bishop e2. And there's also a lot of like g4 ideas in these lines as well, because white's setup is kind of like optimized for this push, where I can castle queenside, I can go rook g1, and things like that. But it still very much depends on what black does. So he played knight d7, which I think is the most natural move. And yeah, here I played rook to g1, which from my memory, I thought was a reasonable try in this position. I don't know how good it is exactly, but to me it looked very playable at the board. And I felt like this was a thing I had seen before. So I decided to try it. I thought it was kind of a fun approach. The idea, of course, just to push g4, g5 and kick the knight and then get more space on the king side, eventually castle queen side, and then we just have kind of like a strong attacking position with opposite sides castling. So black started spending a little bit of time. He played e5, though still pretty quickly. So I wasn't sure if rook g1 caught him off guard. I mean, usually this kind of move does, but I wasn't totally sure. You never know these days. People are preparing a lot and they're studying openings, and you know, it's definitely not the first time this move has been played, like in this kind of position. So I wasn't sure. But anyway, he goes e5. This is a very logical move, just kind of taking the center. Here I took on d5. And I think this position, I mean, it's very concrete. So in the game, he goes c takes d5. And I'll show you guys what happens there. But knight takes d5, I imagine, is kind of the safer choice, getting this structure, which is actually like a reverse Sicilian, if you think about it, because we traded the c pawn for the d pawn. It's as if black has played like, you know, e4, like playing with white, and we've played a Sicilian setup. And very tricky position to evaluate. I don't know if white really wants to go g4 anymore, but yeah, here, you know, maybe a3, maybe bishop d3 somewhere, castling queenside. It'd be, yeah, very dynamic position. But definitely one I have to probably check. So he goes c takes d5, and of course this move looks more logical, just taking the center. But it really kind of depends on what happens here. So knight b5. This is usually the idea for white. He played bishop b8. And now white has two moves here. There's rook c1 and there's bishop a3. So rook c1, this is what I ended up doing. I was a little bit hesitant about this because I thought black could go e4, knight d4, and take this pawn on h2. You know, just grabbing a pawn. But I don't know, I felt like I would have good compensation here. Like rook h1, for example, bishop e5. I was thinking bishop a3, rook e8, and knight f5, for example. And then I'm trying to get to the d6 square. I have the c7 square as well. I thought white had some very possible compensation here. Of Of course, there's other moves. Like I can also just play like knight c7, force black to give up the dark squared bishop. And then in something like this, I would think, yeah, white has a ton of play for the pawn. Like the rook is super active, the bishops are super strong, and we're just missing this like one little h pawn, and yeah, white's rook is doing well. So I was pretty happy to enter that this kind of position. And because of that, I ended up going rook to c1. Another option would have been bishop a3. Then after rook e8 to play knight d6 and win the two bishops this way. But yeah, I didn't like this move. I can't say I didn't like it, but I figured black goes e4 here, and I didn't think this is like that great for white because, okay, we have the bishop pair, but king is in the center. You know, black is going to get like knight e5 possibly and bishop g4, and I mean, to me, this looked pretty unclear. So, yeah, I ended up going rook c1. And, yeah, I was kind of expecting e4, but to my surprise, black played a6. And he played it like, not immediately or anything, but like only after a couple minutes, right? So I was like, what's going on? Because to me, it's like if knight c7 takes, queen takes, that's just a great endgame for. It's like the same endgame we just saw, except we're not down a pawn. So I'm just very happy with that position. The dark square bishop is super strong, and I was just trying to like, you know, to me that felt funny. So I realized like knight c7 actually he wants to go rook a7, and then my knight is trapped on c7, and then black wants to go b5. And all of a sudden, I'm like, uh-oh, what? Like, what am I doing there? So this was kind of a critical moment, and I had to calculate a lot here because if I don't go knight c7, if I just go back knight c3, knight a3, I mean, then I just lost a bunch of time, and it's a terrible position. So. Yeah, I ended up playing this after a lot of thought. Black goes rook a7, of course, because taking, again, white's just much better there. And so I take this one on e5. But yeah, I was very nervous about this because, like, I expected b5 from black, and then the knight is trapped, and it's not clear how to defend it. But I did have some options. So like one option I realized I could play knight takes b5, for example. A takes, knight c6. And here I get a rook and couple pawns for the two knights. And it's actually a lot. Like I was thinking queen c7, takes, and like bishop takes b5. And here it's 3 pawns. But I wasn't like totally clear about what's going on in this position. Like white is a material, but black is like bishop a6, for example. And then I don't know, there's queen a6, there's some knight e5 stuff. You know, it's, yeah, it really wasn't easy for me to say, like, if white is better or how much better. Because we're at material, but rook is on g1, king is in the center. Like, it's a very strange position. But I realized that this is at least playable for me, and I feel like it should be better for white. But then I also... also came up with just simple approach, knight takes d7. And here's kind of a funny position. So at this point, my opponent started to tank. And it was just funny to like have this position on the board for like a while. And people were like watching which I thought was cool. It's like such a funny position. You don't often see like c7, d7, you know, together. But yeah, my idea is that I want to take on f6 with check. So if black takes this knight with anything, then I take with check. Black has to recapture. I'll have time to move the queen, and then I'm up a pawn. Black structure is ruined. Yeah, if he takes with a minor piece, so if he takes with the knight, then I have knight takes d5, so my knight gets out. And if he takes with the bishop, I was thinking I would go bishop takes f6. And then after queen takes f6, knight takes d5, then I'm well, I'm 2 pawns up and the knight got out, so I was definitely kind of okay with this. So yeah, I felt like queen takes d7 was the only move. Because here, if I take on f6 after gf6, my knight is actually stuck and I'm losing the piece and I think lost. Also, black can go rook takes c7 in this position, and then bishop c3, b4. Just wins the piece. But I do have bishop e5 here. So this was the move I had to kind of see from afar. But I was really unclear, like walking into this, right? Because like this position, because it's like from back here. You know, I had to see like knight c7, then take, b5, and then bishop e5, and yeah. And I was thinking like, you know, if I miss one resource, I could just be losing the piece. So it's kind of an uncomfortable moment, especially because my opponent was playing really quickly. So I was like, does he have some like special preparation or what's going on? So, okay, eventually we do get to this moment, and he had already started thinking by this point, so I was, of course, feeling a lot more confident, and I felt like, okay, maybe I can actually get away with this, because the knight looks very funny, but we did win a pawn on e5, and next I want to go like bishop d3 and just develop the rest of my pieces. I have queen c6 maybe at some point if I need to untangle. But also, actually, it's just very hard for black to put more pressure on this knight. So one line, for example, if knight e8, then I can take, and then on bishop takes e5, I can take on c8. And then black gets the piece back, but I'm very happily going for this endgame with an extra pawn. You know, opposite color bishops, but yeah, I feel like this, you know, I'm very happy to play pawn up in the endgame. So I should have reasonable chances there. Maybe there's something better for white as well, but that was good enough for me. And yeah, so I wasn't sure what black should do. He ends up going bishop b7, which I thought made sense. And one line I was considering was bishop d4, hitting the rook. But then like rook c8, bishop takes here. I wasn't totally sure about this. Though there was a funny queen sack here. Like if rook takes, I can play bishop c5. I can also think about like taking here and then playing some position like this with 2 rooks versus the queen. But okay, after d4, I thought like a little messy. So I ended up just going for a simpler approach. I calculated a little bit here and I played bishop d3. And the idea is just to stop rook c8 because of bishop f5 and also threaten like maybe takes and bishop h7 as well. So here I was really expecting knight e4, and then what I was planning on was f3, knight d6, and I don't know if knight d6 is forced, but I was just looking at this one line. And then I thought bishop d4 might be interesting here. The idea of like rook c8, take this one, and then let's say if rook takes here, bishop takes here, king h8, take this one, rook c2, bishop c2. This position I thought was very, very good for white. Because we have like 2 rooks and like 2 pawns for the queen. We can trade this guy off, and yeah, it's just a huge material advantage. So I thought this should be pretty good. But anyway, there may be options along the way. Black ends up going rook c8, which I think probably just the blunder, because now bishop f5. I'm not sure what he overlooked exactly. Maybe he was counting on rook takes c7, because bishop takes d7, rook takes c2. That would be nice for black, but I can just take back here, and we're winning the exchange, and we're just winning the game basically. Queen is hanging, bishop is hanging, and yeah, black has no move. So yeah, after bishop f5, black played queen e7, but now we're just picking up all the material. So bishop takes c8. If he takes back this way, I have immediately knight takes b5. Kind of a nice tactic. Triple attack. Everything hanging. I think knight takes d5 also good. So black played queen takes e5. But now bishop takes b7. rook takes, and the knight finally gets out with knight takes a6. Knight takes d5 I think was also possible, but I like this one just because it threatens to just trade off this knight. Like this knight that's been a headache the whole game. Like, am I losing this knight? Is it going to get caught? Finally, I can just trade it off. I'm up the exchange. Also, queen c8 check is a very painful threat. So I think black is just losing material. It's really hard to save this. For example, like if rook b6, queen c8 check, I thought was a nice finish. Queen e8, then we're just trading, bringing the rook in. That's game over. And then if knight e8, then f4. I thought would be kind of cool because queen just can't hold on to everything, and we're just winning more material. So yeah, after knight takes a6, it was resigns, and yeah, that was it. So I was pretty happy with that one. I felt like, I don't know if I played the opening correctly. I'll definitely have to check it, but as far as like the calculation went, I thought it was a good effort.